Folks, welcome back to Ancient of Days. This is William, or Bill, Sneblin. Welcome to life.
Well, thank you. It is great to be here and exciting in sunny Roswell. Tonight I'm going to be speaking on the War of the Worlds, and I mean that in a spiritual sense. Essentially UFOs, Masonry, and Satanism in the occult social order. And the reason I got tapped for doing this is because I have a background that's rather extensive in the occult and in Satanism and things of that nature. Next slide. This is our ministry, by the way. This is our little plug real quickly. Our website is withoneaccord.org if you want to look at some of our documents and what have you on there. We have a ministry that's involved in helping people get set free, and we also, of course, preach the gospel and do apologetics against cults, of which obviously the UFO thing is a major thing. Okay, next slide. Essentially, I've been a student of the UFO phenomenon longer than anything else that I've done, except for the fact that I was born a Catholic. I didn't have anything to do with that. So I've been involved with it on and off ever since 1963. And I think there may be a correlation here, because in my experience, and I've talked to some of the other people here that do this kind of work, and we all pretty much agree that for most people that are victimized by UFO-type phenomenon or are obsessed with it in some other way, it's because, in fact, they have some kind of occult involvement. And that seems to be the case with me. In my case, oddly enough, I had a nun give me a book when I was in, 8th grade, by Frank Edwards. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of him. He was one of the kind of Fortean type writers that did a lot of stuff with UFOs. That just totally got me hooked on UFOs. Since that time, and I'm just going to run through this real briefly because we've got a lot of stuff to cover tonight. I was told in college, I wanted to be a priest. My whole life, I've been obsessed with religion, as you'll see by the time we're done here tonight. But how many of you realize that religion is not necessarily what Yeshua, Jesus, is all about? He's about something entirely different from religion. But in my case, when I was in minor seminary, I had a professor tell me that I should do the same thing that Jesus did, which is to study the occult, because I was going to be a priest. And in Catholic doctrine, there's this idea that a priest is another Christ. And so therefore, I went and started reading books on the paranormal, books on ESP, on UFOs. And by the time 1968 rolled around, I was a sophomore in college, I'd been initiated a first-degree witch. In 1972, I was ordained a spiritualist minister and a medium. I was trained as a medium with the Alliance of Divine Love. I became a Druidic high priest in 1973, July. I became a Wiccan high priest in September of that same year. Now, for reasons that are best left undiscussed, that same year I also made a legal name change to Christopher P. Syn, S-Y-N, because supposedly that had numerological and karmic relationships that I was supposed to fulfill. In 1974, August, we moved to Milwaukee to start a network of covens there. In 1975, in Milwaukee, I began studying Masonry. I was made an entered apprentice that year in Heartland Lodge number 122. In 1975, I read the Satanic Bible for the first time and ended up joining the Church of Satan. This gets more bizarre, don't worry. In 1976, I was ordained to the Old Roman Catholic priesthood, because you can't be a Satanic priest until first you're a Catholic priest. In 1976, November, I was raised to the sublime degree of a Master Mason, although there's really nothing sublime about it. But 1977, I was made a Knight Templar, which is 10th degree York Rite. Oh, I forgot to say, next slide. This is me as a brand new witch. This is sort of my hippie period. This is taken in 1969. And so as you can see, I got a lot of gray hair since then. And believe it or not, most of this happened all in one night, and if I have time, I'll tell you that story. I became a warlock in the Church of Satan in April of '77. I was made a bishop in the Gnostic Catholic Church, which is a Crowleyan version of the Orthodox Church, in July of that year. In 1977 September, I was created a 90th degree Mason in the Rite of Memphis Mitzrayim. I was also brought into Voodoo that year. And finally, my last step before getting born again, in August of 1980, I was baptized a Mormon. And that same year, I was also made a Shrine Noble, a 32nd degree Mason, and I got a master's degree in theology from a Catholic seminary. You think I was a little confused spiritually? So let's see, at the same time, I was a Mormon, I was getting a Catholic theology degree, I was a Shriner, and supposedly you can't be a Catholic and a Mason at the same time. And I was also practicing voodoo, and, you know, one thing I didn't mention, I was also a practicing vampire. So, pretty bizarre stuff. Well, I finally received the Grand Sovereign Inspector General 33rd degree in Continental Freemasonry. That means it was a degree from Europe, not from America. Then I attained 34th degree in the Palladium in January of 1981. In May of that year, I was finally, change the slide here. This is a picture of me as a satanic priest. As you can see, I kind of cut my hair and stuff, but actually, this was taken right about the time I have short hair at that time because I had to work as a security guard. And that's the funny thing. I mean, everybody tells you, if you join the satanic religion, you'll get wealthy and rich and powerful beyond your wildest dreams. And I was working as a security guard for minimum wage. So it just shows you the devil's a liar, amen? Anyhow, the funny thing that happened to me on the way to being a Mormon, I was called to be an institute teacher. Now, the Church Institute of Church Educational System is an adult education thing. It's an arm of Brigham Young University. And I was asked to teach a course in the New Testament. See, the amazing thing you've got to understand about my story is even though I had a master's degree from a Catholic seminary in theology, I never read the Bible. I had never read Paul's epistles, even though I took a course in Pauline theology. Got good grades in it, too, but for all the good it did me. So, for the first time in my life, I had to actually read the entire New Testament from cover to cover. And you know, you've probably heard the expression, how a broken clock is right twice a day. Well, that's true of the Mormon Church. They got one thing right, at least. They use the King James Bible for their Bible. So I actually read through, and the more I read in the Bible, the more I realized that Paul could not have been a Mormon. I realized that I read, Galatians 1:8 about if I or an angel from heaven preach any other gospel than the one that I have preached, let him be accursed. And I also read 1 Corinthians 15, which of course says, Paul defines his gospel. He says that what I delivered unto you is that Christ died on the cross and he rose from the dead and was seen of many. So that's the gospel. There's nothing in there about wearing magic underwear or going to the temple or doing genealogy or any of the 4,000 other things Mormons are supposed to do. So I finally, in June 22nd, 1984, I knelt at the foot of my bed and gave my heart to the Lord, asked him to be the Lord and Savior of my life. And guess what? He did it. Hallelujah. So that was the beginning of my new life. I told you all of that, and that's probably the quickest I've ever done my testimony. That's like light speed, for me. If you want the full version, you can either get our book, Lucifer Dethroned, or you can get on our website and get a video that's called Exposing the Illuminati from Within. Oh, I forgot to tell you, I also was inducted into the Illuminati. I left that one out for some reason. Just a little thing, I want to add, next slide. Important thing. What did all these apparently different organizations have in common? Well, as we shall see, the commonality in all things was that they all have something to do with UFOs. Now, that might surprise you, but you're going to see how all this comes together in a really very sinister little web. Next slide. Basically, we're going to be operating on certain principles. I don't think any of these are going to be news to you, except unless maybe this is your first time at this kind of a conference. We're going to use the Bible as our absolute standard of truth, both in terms of doctrine and also in terms of history. And also the other thing is that while the Bible does not discuss aliens or, flying saucers per se, we believe there are significant prophetic implications in the current connection between the UFO phenomenon and, for example, the New Age movement, the various saucer cults, the witchcraft and satanic movements, and also with Freemasonry. Next slide. well, I'm going to kind of go through this fairly fast because it's already been talked about several times, but I think a key warning for our day is what is in Luke 17:26. Yeshua, Jesus said, "As it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be in the days of the Son of Man." And of course, the only sin that was really specifically mentioned, although I'm sure there was plenty of other wickedness going on, was the fact that the sons of God were coming down to marry the daughters of men. And of course, that produced the giants in the earth and the Nephilim. So, next slide. You're going to get slightly different viewpoints on this, and since I'm one of the last people to talk, you're going to get mine last. I do agree. I think that the UFO phenomenon is essentially a demonic / fallen angelic phenomenon. In my personal theology, as I understand the Bible, I think there's a difference between demons and fallen angels. They're entirely two different things. It's like comparing a mosquito to a human being to compare a demon to a fallen angel, just so we're clear on that. And we've done like 10 or 12, 15 years of doing deliverance on people too as part of our ministry. So we've had a lot of opportunities to, to test that theory empirically. What happens here is that this angelic activity is a source of much of the reporting on alien activity and supposed alien races. Next slide. Now, the way I look at this, and this may be different from how some of the other speakers do, but when you look at the various classic alien races that are supposedly out there in ufology, you have the Nordics, you have the reptilians, and you have the Greys. Those are the main classifications. There are also sub-classifications. What I believe is that when you see a Nordic, I hope you don't, but if you do, you're looking at a fallen angel in a more pristine condition. Because obviously angels are beautiful beings in their original state. The problem is if you're a fallen angel, you've just cut yourself off from the one source of beauty, of creativity, of love, and of power. So what happens? You start resembling your new father, the worm, the dragon, the serpent. And so gradually, fallen angels start degenerating. Like I say, they're gone to seed, and they end up looking reptilian. They end up looking like these, draconian or reptilian or whatever you want to call them, forms of aliens. They're still very dangerous and they're still very powerful. And I believe, and I mean, again, there's different opinions on this, they can briefly shapeshift and appear to be human, but that their natural state is like this. In terms of the Greys, who are, of course, the real famous aliens, you see these things all over town here, I think the Greys are essentially genetic experimentation of the fallen angels that didn't work out very well. So therefore, they're functioning kind of like drones. They're like the workers. I don't think they're very smart. In my experience, they're kind of almost robot-like in what they do. So that's how I look at things. And so I think there, in my humble opinion, I think there really are, fallen angelic technologies out there. I think there are spacecraft or whatever you want to call them, aircraft that really do exist in the physical plane. I don't think it's all just, somehow spiritual or holograms or whatever. But again, that's not a thing we need to debate. Next slide. I think behind all of this are very high-level angelic powers, because a lot of people, they think, well, okay, fallen angels, that's fine, but we forget about what Paul tells us in Ephesians 6:12. He talks about principalities and powers. Again, the word archon has been already mentioned, which is the Greek that's used in here. Rulers of the darkness, spiritual